Welcome everyone, hope you had a great day today, and welcome to today's video. I do apologize if the video upload schedule the past few days has a little bit been, slow, relatively. There's a lot of stuff gone away past few days, a lot of responsibilities, projects, etc. just kind of gone away, so video making just kind of took a backseat for me the past few days. For example, I've been working on Blender stuff, and I'll probably show a Blender project I just recently finished on screen, so I've been relatively busy with various things, and again, video making has kind of taken a backseat a little bit, but I'm back to it, and today we're going to go over Engineer's 4 different grenade options, and I'll just give my general opinions and thoughts on each. So, hope you all enjoyed the video, and like, comment, subscribe if you do. Every bit of support helps, and I will really appreciate it if you do so. So, again, hope you enjoyed the video, everyone, and let's get started right away into Engineer's first grenade choice. Starting off with the first grenade option for Engineer, we have the L.U.R.E. with a carry amount of 4, duration of 20, and dance moves of 6, though dance moves are completely cosmetic and do not affect any mechanical, attribute of the grenade itself. So the L.U.R.E. is you throw it out, and it'll spawn a hologram of a dwarf dancing, and it'll attract nearby bugs to attack it instead of you and your teammates. So there are some factors you need to keep in mind when, in terms of how effective it is at attracting stuff to it. A bug's overall distance away from the L.U.R.E. affects how likely it is to get attracted to it, so a grunt that's like 50 meters away will be vastly less likely to go after the L.U.R.E. compared to a grunt that spawned, right next to the L.U.R.E. when it got thrown down, and it's like a meter away, for example. And also, if the bug in question is already picked a target, for example, if a grunt has picked a gunner, for example, as his chosen target and wants to bite the toes off of, it'll be less likely that the L.U.R.E. will actually trick them into attacking it. And bigger targets also are not as easily affected, so a group of grunt will be much more likely to be attracted to the L.U.R.E. compared to a bulk, for example. So all those things are needed. You need to keep all those things in mind, of course. But most of the time, this is basically a very powerful form of pheromone, technically, like mechanically. Like a pheromone against, if you use the crossbow bolts or the pheromone canister Scout has against Praetorian, that will attract a fair few bugs, but the L.U.R.E. tends to be a lot more effective with that. It'll attract quite a few bugs to it, and it does have health, and upon being destroyed, or the duration of 20 seconds, running its course, if either of those situations occur where, again, if the duration runs its course or it gets destroyed, it'll let out a small electrical pulse, basically. And this pulse of electrical damage will not do much to grunts or anything really bigger than that, but against swarmers and neodites, it will basically have a very good chance of killing them because it is a decent amount of electrical damage, and it will chunk off some health from grunts, for example, but besides that, it won't do much else. Now, of course, the 20-second duration, the carry amount of 4 is pretty good. The carry amount of 4 is a little bit of an issue because you only have 4 to start and get 2 per resupply. But this is more, given how effective it is at whirring stuff towards it, as per name may suggest, it's still pretty good despite only having 4 to start and, again, 2 per resupply. And this thing has many different uses. If you want to play as more of a distraction engineer, where you want to basically just throw this thing out and either attract bugs in a certain kill zone where your turrets or your teammates are holding down an area, and that's a effective area to kill the bugs in. You can set a L.U.R.E. there, and that'll attract all the bugs to it, and you can take them down a lot easier. Or if your teammate's down, or if you need to defend an objective and you're getting overwhelmed, throwing the L.U.R.E. out can be pretty effective at relieving some pressure, allowing you to, for example, protect a black box, or protect a Retta, or possibly just resurrect a teammate that's down a lot easier, since instead of like 20 bugs going after you, there's going to be only 10, and that's a massive decrease in overall danger, because 20 grunts is a lot more dangerous than 10 grunts, for example, which, obvious, but relieving some pressure from teammates as well is also pretty good. So this is a very effective way to simply just relieve pressure and just help divert some of the enemies to another part of the cave where you can possibly take them down in your leisure. You can set a L.U.R.E. down, and as soon as everything goes around it, you just blow it up with a nuke. That's a very easy way to deal with a lot of stuff, possibly. As well as making sure that nothing really, there's not going to be like that overwhelming swarm, like a massive grunts and Praetorians that will just run over you and your teammates if you're unprepared. So that'll help out, against that possible situation occurring. Though, of course, this thing has no real offensive potential, obviously. Like, the electrical pulse isn't really going to do much besides against, like, swarmers and neodites, or, like, larvae. So, like, unless this, like, swarmer class enemies will get destroyed by the pulse, but everything else will just chunk some health off. Like, even grunts have little issue tanking a hit from a L.U.R.E's explosion. And it's very simple. You throw it out and it'll wear stuff towards it. So, very good against, like, Praetorians, Mac Terror, or dangerous enemies that you want to make them focus somewhere else. But besides that, like, you're not really going to get much use out of it in terms of, like, destroying bugs. It's more of, like, you can mostly use this as either like a distraction piece so your teammates can reorganize or stay alive, or it is a distraction piece where you can ward the bugs in a certain area and then blow them up with C4 from Driller, or like, again, a nuke. So like a very good grenade. This is very solid. A distraction piece on demand is very good at helping your teammates survive, but of course, that comes at a cost that your grenade has very little offensive power, so against like dreads or bulks, this thing is basically useless because they're very unlikely to go after it. Like bulks and dreads are pretty much not going to care at all. They'll keep on charging forward. They won't care about us at all. The swarmers from the regular dreadnought, or basic dreadnought, I guess the best way to put it, will go after it when he does spawn them, so that could be useful, but besides that, though, against like massive targets, it's not gonna really do much. So a very good option overall for NG's grenades swap. But if you're looking for something a lot more offensive in of itself and not really a combo or distraction piece, then you may need to look somewhere else for something a lot more outright damaging. Speaking of a more damaging grenade option for engineer, we have the plasma burster. It will carry amount of 6, burst 4, burst area damage 60, and burst effect radius 3.5. So how this grenade works is quite simple. Upon hitting a piece of terrain after being thrown, it'll let out a burst of plasma, and then over the next few seconds will release 3 more bursts of plasma in quick succession. This is kind of very similar to Driller's Shredder grenade, where you kind of want to bowl for it, basically, where you want to kind of set up like bowling, because like you want to basically wind up a shot of like a bunch of glyphic grunts and or near a target you can get, or players if you're want to do that. But you basically want to bowl for targets where you want to wind up a shot and then throw it and kind of like make the grenade just go through like an entire swarm of glyphic grunts, and as well bursts of damage as it goes through. So this is very effective in a lot of ways against like wire targets. Like, it has a little bit of a fear factor to it. Yeah, I have like the exact stats on the side, so yeah, it has a little bit of a fear factor to it, though you don't really notice it that much. And it is half decent against armor. Like, it's not gonna be that great, but it'll do some damage against armor, and it'll be half decent against it. And it can do pretty well against like glyphic grunts, for example. Like, you'll just shred grunts and like wire targets like that pretty easily. This thing will shred swarmer-esque or relative enemies, like in terms of that toughness area. Like, neodites, swarmers, larvae. It'll deal with them quite well. It'll deal with grunts quite well. However, this thing kind of lacks proper strength against like single targets, because it's 240 damage in total, 60 damage times 4, so 240 damage is pretty good, but for a grenade, it isn't that great against like a single target. Like, a Praetorian will take some damage from it, most definitely, but it will it won't obliterate a Praetorian. Like, it'll take some health off, but again, it won't do much to it. So this is very much a exclusively anti like swarm, chaff, glyphic grunt grenade. Like, it won't do much more to anything above like Praetorian. Problem is, there's also another problem with the plasma burster in that it relies heavily on the physics system of DRG, which is a little bit weird sometimes, and if your grenade goes wild, for example, it could just bounce off a wall or like a random piece of terrain to go in a different direction, and possibly instead of going after like a swarm, you throw this, and instead of getting rid of like 20 grunts, it hits a crystal and it bounces in a weird direction, and instead like only gets half of like the swarm basically. Instead of 20 grunts dead is 10 or 15. Like it'll still do damage. Like you'll most likely do pretty hefty damage to grunts, but it's like due to how the physics system works in DRG, in order to get reliable, like consistent, like anti, like grunt swarm stuff going, you want to have like a flat surface and like very few obstructions in order to properly make sure that you know where the grenade is going, so you're able to maximize its effectiveness. Now, of course, you don't really need to be that stingy with them. You have a carrying amount of 6, and carrying amount of 6 means you have 6 at the start and 3 per resupply. So this is pretty much the most numerous grenade energy you will have. So you can throw these around without much worry that you're going to be like inefficient with them. But another problem with these grenades as well, like the Shudder grenade for L.U.R.E, is that these things are not going to be that great against aerial targets like Mactera, since Mactera tend to not be next to walls, and that's the best way to use this plasma burster, like rolling it across the ground or making it skim across a wall to let out the bursts against like grunts and all that stuff that are onto the wall or the floor and are coming at you. Like you want to bowl with the terrain to basically get as much damage as possible on grunts, for example, but Mactera tend to fly in open spaces, and there ain't much terrain in open spaces, obviously, so unless like the Mactera comes like through a choke point or they happen to be near a wall, you won't really get much damage in with this grenade to them. So this also goes for all other forms of flying enemies in the game, which can be an issue since flying enemies tend to be the most dangerous enemies in the game. Like Neodites are definitely a big nuisance, and all forms of Mactera are absolutely a problem. So usually if you want to use a grenade on something, you want to use it on them, so having a grenade that's really inefficient at flying stuff is a bit of an issue. And plus, this is a grenade that can easily damage your teammates. It's like 4 bursts of 6 damage, and with the grenade, like occasionally just going wild and like bouncing from like different areas really quickly. Like it can bounce off a wall and ricochet into like a different area you may not expect it to if you're not prepared. And that could actually damage your teammates quite badly. Like this thing, if like your teammates get stuck in like 2 to 3 blasts, that could be a real big issue because that can easily go for their shield, and any bugs that attack them afterwards will then go directly to their health, which is not great. And also, it's like very dangerous. Like a whir is, like you don't have to worry about it, hurting your teammates with a whir. In the middle of a swarm with you and your teammates like intermixed between bugs, you have to be really careful to throw this dangerous, very dangerous grenade into like a pack of like grunts, for example, because you may actually hit L.U.R.E or the gunner that are like intermixed with them, because grunts come from all sides and it becomes like a mosh pit. So it's like you have to be very careful not to accidentally blast your teammates apart, since it's just blasting your teammates apart isn't always the greatest thing when you're trying to win a mission, so you gotta be very careful of that. So overall, I would say this is a very good anti-grunt, anti-swarmer tool, but unfortunately it's due to like relying on the physics of the grenade and just rewind that you have a queen shot, and that if you don't have a queen shot, you have a very high risk of butchering your teammates possibly if you're on Has-5 and it's like, oh no, my shield's gone, and there's two slashers near me that the grenade missed because it bounced weirdly, but it hit me instead. I guess I'll die now, that kind of idea roughly. So it's definitely dangerous, but in like the preferred situation where it's like bowling, where you find like a small hallway and like all the grunts are coming from that direction. If you just throw this down the hallway, you'll probably take down the entire grunt swarm right there. So it's very effective for that, but this is also this is a very inconsistent grenade because it relies a lot on terrain and what enemies spawn. So Mactera Plague has some issues, but if this thing goes well, it'll go pretty well, but if you don't get like the best situation ever, it may lag behind the other grenades in terms of efficiency and overall use and flexibility. Because it's just a damage, maker. It'll just do damage. It doesn't have any more utility besides that. So, if it lives and dies by its damage, if it's not in the best situation ever, it won't have the best damage output, and as such, it won't be an efficient grenade from that whole situation. So, something you need to keep in mind. But when it works, it works. When it doesn't work, it's fine. But you'll definitely probably prefer something else over it. So again, I haven't. This is a grenade I had the least experience in, so I'm still kind of getting used to it. But from my experience, it's fine again, but it's a little bit inconsistent. The next grenade engineer has is proximity mine, a very quite obvious, grenade in its usefulness. It has a carry amount of 4, an arming time of 3, an area damage of 110, and a effect radius of 5. So again, this is a very obvious, like, what does this grenade do? It's a mine. Upon throwing it out, and upon hitting terrain, it'll stick to the terrain, and have an arming time of 3 seconds. And once the arming time is finished, it'll become active. When active, any enemy larger than a swarmer-esque enemy like a Neodite, Swarmer, or Larvae, for example, a Glyphic Grunt or Mycteris spawn will activate it, and Praetorian anything bigger, but Swarmer-esque enemies won't. Once they are within the radius of the mine, it will beep a few times, and then will go off. It'll make a little signal to say, hey, I'm about to explode, and then it'll explode. And it has a total of 4, I guess bursts is the best way to put it, because, that's the way Plasma Burster, puts the separate explosions, but it can go, each mine can go off 4 times, or have 4 different bursts, if you want to put it that way. And each of them doing pretty hefty damage. Since 110 damage will pretty much shred Glyphic Grunts with pretty much no problem whatsoever, and it does have a little bit of a fear effect, so stuff that does survive will get occasionally like scared and like run off in a random direction, so that could be quite nice. And even against like larger targets like dreadnoughts, like bulks, not really, because they are pretty tough and they have a little bit of resistance to explosives, and like Praetorians and oppressors, this thing will do fine, but they'll definitely tank it quite a bit, but this thing will do at least some damage to them. But the thing that this thing really goes well with is going against grunts. Grunts get shredded by this thing. Like Mycteris spawn and like stuff, if they get close to it, will get shredded by this thing. And assuming you put in the correct area, like a choke point, this thing can like shred a lot of stuff that comes into its radius. And of course, since you have a very interesting mod for your platform gun called Repellent Additive, enemies will avoid walking on the plasticrete foam whenever possible. This will help not only protect certain areas from enemies, since their pathfinding will try and take a route around the foam if they're able to, assuming that's within a reason, like they'll go over it if it's too extreme, but they will try and avoid it when possible. And you can use that to not only, shrink, terrain created choke points even more, but create your own choke points for the mine to be useful in. Since, it's like you have a big open room, you can throw a few platforms down, and the enemies are likely to avoid the foam if they're able to, and if you throw the mines in the areas, that aren't foamed up, the enemies will try and avoid the foam and walk right into the mine. So you can basically just, if you're able to use the platforms to accentuate already existing choke points caused by terrain generation, or create your own in open rooms, so that the mine can be as effective as possible. This is very good against a very, a lot of missions that require you to defend stuff, like Doretta, like escort missions, and the salvage operation missions. Those missions where you defend a black box, not really defend, the bugs are after you for the salvage operations. They don't really go after the black box, but in the areas where you have to defend the location from bugs, these are very good, because if you're able to set up a few platforms, and your turret, you're able to throw up your mines as well, so you can basically walk down an area pretty well. and walking down areas so your teammates feel a lot safer, since it's a lot easier to focus on the bugs in front of you when you know that there's a mine on the wall behind you, so there's nothing that can really get through, to you and get behind you unless it's either dead from the mine or you'll know because the mine exploded behind you. So it's a very good alarm systems and also that situation. So it's very good for walking down areas and making your team focus on a fewer overall areas to defend, which is quite nice. Now, of course, there are some serious problems with this mine, unfortunately, as with all weapons, they have their downsides. This is, again, you have an arming time of 3 seconds. And arming time of 3 seconds means that this thing's pretty much not going to be that great unless you prep it. You have to throw it in front of a swarm by hefty margins so that the swarm, by the time it goes over it, it's 3 seconds have passed and it's armed. And you can't really throw it out on the moment, on the moment basis. You have to find a location that will work as a choke point. Throwing it against an empty wall, for example, isn't really going to work because glyphic grunts and various bugs are very likely to go in that direction unless you there's a choke point or you create one with the foam. So you have to pick your area and make sure it's the area the bugs are likely to go through, and then set it up beforehand, since arming time and all that stuff. This is not something you can just throw on the moment. You have to prep, you have to figure out roughly where you want your mines and what areas you want to walk down and all that stuff. So it does require that level of forethought to make sure the mines are truly effective, since you have a carry amount of 4, so you're not going to get that many during a mission, and you need to at least try to make sure that they're somewhat efficient in order to make use of them properly, and to not feel terrible when I'll get to the good segue into the next problem. You want to make sure you're efficient as well, because you have 4 of them. Problem is with the mines, they go off when anything bigger than a Swarmer-esque enemy walks over them. So Glyphic Grunt, for example, here's a problem. It can't tell the difference between a grunt and 10 grunts. So technically, if 4 grunts in a wide margin, a decent distance between both, all 4 of them, go into the mine, you just kill 4 grunts and the mine's used because it only has 4 bursts. So a grunt goes in, it goes off. Then a grunt goes in, it goes off. A grunt goes in, it goes off. A grunt goes in, goes off, and that's the entire mine. And 4 grunts for a grenade, especially a grenade with only carry capacity of 4 max, ain't good. That is pretty terrible efficiency overall. So you gotta be really careful of that. Of course, what I just stated is a very unlikely situation. It's you're very unlikely to have 4 grunts perfectly walk, Congo line basically into a mine and waste all its charges. So unfortunately, it's thankfully, thankfully for you, unfortunately for the bugs, that situation isn't really that common, but it is something you need to, take account of. And if a Praetorian or some other creature that's tough, an oppressor, walks over it, they're pretty much going to take all 4 charges and not really get that damaged. So this thing's very good against Glyphic Grunts, but against tougher stuff, again, Praetorians and oppressors, is inefficient because they'll damage the oppressor and Praetorian by a decent margin for a AoE basic grenade that isn't really meant to go after Praetorians and stuff like that. It'll still kind of be wasted because you're basically wasting a grenade for maybe if you're pretty lucky a little bit above 30 to 40% of a Praetorian's health if it sits in for all 4 explosions. So that can be a bit of an issue. And yeah, just it's if a lot of Praetorians spawn, so it's during a lot of missions, especially on Has 4 and Has 5 especially, so it's you may need to focus on killing the Praetorians before you reach your mines, because then you'll waste them and then you won't go after grunts, which are all more efficient for. And another thing is that you need to take into consideration is flying enemies. While the mine will definitely go off for flying enemies, they'll still treat them as valid targets. Again, as with the Plasma Burster, Mactera, Neodites, other stuff that flies in the game, fly in open spaces a lot of time, and those open spaces usually don't have much terrain, and unlike the Plasma Burster, you can't ricochet the grenade the mine off a wall and have it, burst midair because it has a setup time, and it's not like a physics based like wherever the grenade goes, the plasma bursts follow like the plasma burster. Like you set it into place, and the mine will set up, and then it's ready and armed. So unless you're able to like corral like Bacteria into like a certain area where there's like a crystal coming out of the ground that goes into the air, or like a choke point created by a driller or your platform, so that the Bacteria have to like go into a certain area to shoot you, or grab you in the case of like grabbers. Like you won't really have a great way to get the mines off, effectively against Bacteria and flying enemies, because it's like there isn't like a great way to like universally set them. Like of course you can do the platform roof idea where you make a roof above the area where you're protecting, and now kind of force Bacteria to get low and possibly go under the roof of platforms you created in order to properly get an attack off, and the mine will work pretty well there. But usually getting Bacteria and like other flying enemies into like a mine's radius is pretty difficult, so more than often the mine is exclusive, like not exclusively, but it's a heavily like anti-ground weapon. Though of course you have to set it up first, so of course you'll probably, depending on how the terrain spawns and where you're standing for a swarm or a mission event like a black box, you can set that up so that Bacteria at least have a chance of like getting hit by the mine. Because if you get like a few Bacteria in a mine blast, that's pretty good. Like taking out a few grunts and like taking down a few Bacteria and probably chipping away at something else for a single mine, that's pretty effective. Like that's pretty efficient. So assuming you get this in the right place, the mine is very nice at taking down like a lot of stuff, but unfortunately you have to forethought to like figure out where exactly you want the mines to go, and what's like if you want to make a platform structure to like make the mines hit aerial targets, or like limit where ground based enemies like grunts go, so you have to keep that in mind. But as like an effective AoE walkdown tool, it is a wonderful grenade. I love this grenade a lot, and is honestly one of my more favorite grenades in the game. It's just very efficient when you get it going, and in like a defensive situation like salvage, or like a escort mission, these grenades are quite nice because you're defending one set point, so all bugs have to come to you, and that's very good because again, like this is an explosive grenade. As such, you could do friendly fire, and if you do this in a rush and you accidentally throw a mine on the floor and it goes off, you basically can't pick it up again, because once a mine explodes once, you can't pick it up. And yeah, if it just goes off on the floor and it's stuck there, all your team has to avoid that area because it'll do friendly fire to them, and possibly accidentally throwing a mine in an area where it basically walks out that area for your teammates as well as the bugs can be a serious issue. So you have to keep that in mind, since 110 damage, that's quite a bit. That can definitely take a chunk out of shields and cause some serious issues. Again, it's like, oh shoot, the grenade NG thrown has hit me. There's two swarmers around me, or not two swarmers, two slashers. Oh no, it's like you don't want to accidentally put your teammates in a dangerous situation like that, because the mine is very much a threat to you and your teammates as much as the bugs. So you have to keep that in mind at the very least. But besides that, this is a very effective grenade in my personal opinion. Great for defense. You have to set it up, of course, as I keep on mentioning over and over again. But besides that, though, it's a very effective tool overall. Very good for utility purposes in terms of defense. And it can be halfway decent. It's like a stopgap, like barricade, basically, where it's like you see a swarm coming, throw a mine out, then every single time a swarm of grunts tries to enter a room, for example, via a small tunnel, they get blasted. So very good for that. So overall, very effective grenade, and just a very nice tool for Engie to have. Final grenade for Engineer is the Shredder Swarm Grenade. A very interesting grenade, since it's the only grenade as of this current moment that actually spawns entities to fight for you. So, carried amount 4, shredders contained per grenade 5, shredder damage 8, shredder duration 40 seconds. So, This is a very simple but very interesting grenade. You throw the grenade out, and upon hitting terrain, 5 shredders will pop out of the grenade or materialize out of the grenade, and they will attack all nearby hostiles. Since they will treat you and the fellow dwarves as allies, but everything else, including other robots, will be treated as hostiles, and they'll go after them, as in like similar to a standard shredder that you may find in like rival like incursion like missions, a lot of stuff. So they're basically the same exact shredder, like model and like attributes and like attack like profile relatively for a normal shredder that you may experience in game and you have to fight against. So these are a very interesting, grenade overall, because the shredders are like a very the shredders and being part of grenade makes this a very interesting fire and forget weapon, because the shredders will treat you and your fellow dwarves and teammates as allies, but everything else is hostile. And since they don't have AoE, they can be just thrown into the middle of combat, and they'll ignore your fellow teammates, and will go after everything around them, which makes them very efficient, unironically, because 40 seconds of like 5 shredders like doing 8 damage, which isn't much. Like 8 damage is equivalent to like my SMG that I currently build. Like that, my current SMG build is like 8 damage per shot, which isn't much, and I have like a small decrease in damage from the this overclock. So it's like 8 damage isn't much. Like 8 damage is very little, but 5 like swarmers or not 5 shredders, mixed up swarmers and shredders because they have the same, very similar, name with an S to start. So it's like it's almost 3 in the morning, so words are getting a little bit mixed up here. But like 5 shredders doing like 8 damage per attack to like everything around you for 40 seconds is pretty good, since they'll follow you around, and upon being released from the grenade, and like if they see anything near them or any enemies near them, they'll immediately go for it, and they can actually be somewhat aggressive. Since, but yeah, that was a bit of a stutter. Yeah, I'm getting tired, so I do apologize if I'm stuttering a little bit. Brain is slowly dying, basically, so IQ is dropping at an astounding rate. But yeah, so like the shredders are actually fairly aggressive, because again, if there's any enemies around them or near them, they'll go right after it, and they'll be actually pretty aggressive. Like they won't go across the room to fight something, but they'll basically just chain themselves. Like they'll go after a grunt, and it's like, oh, there's a grunt next to me. I'm done with this grunt. I'll go after this one, and so on. So they actually can do pretty well, since like like a mosh pit, for example, like you throw this down, and the shredders will constantly just damage everything around them. And sure, like 8 damage per attack, like shredder attack, isn't that much, but like for 5 of them, like a single one can take down a grunt pretty relatively easily. Like it won't be that fast, but they'll deal with it pretty easily. And like with 5 of them going around taking down swarmers, which are pretty good against because they'll pretty much one tap them, or like swarmer-esque enemies like naildites, they'll go through like those type of enemies really fast. They'll go through grunts relatively fast, and like 3 to 4 of them could put some serious hurt on a Praetorian even. Like they'll go through the armor, and while they probably won't kill the Praetorian, they'll most definitely just deal a lot of damage. They'll break some of the armor off, and which is very useful for the rest of your teammates. So it's a very interesting like support grenade. Like if you if you have like a mosh pit situation where like like teammates and bugs in like a small area, and they're all intermixed and fighting, this is a very good grenade, because like the mine or like the plasma burster, much similar to the L.U.R.E, you don't really have much of like an AoE concern like friendly fire, because those swarmers will only go against bugs, so they'll chase after Mactera and leave you and your fellow teammates alone. So and also it's just a very flexible grenade, because like you don't need to really worry about like terrain issues, like proximity mine with like getting in the right place to and make sure that the mine will go off effectively, or the plasma burster where you have to basically like bowl, basically like you go bowling with it and try and like make the grenade skate across like a wall or the ground, so the plasma bursts that come out of it do decently well. Like assuming that there's bugs near you, the shredder swarm will do pretty well, so they'll go after stuff, they'll take stuff down, and as like a great support tool to go along with your turret, you can unironically be very effective against like chaff. Like the swarmers can, or not shred, the shredders can go very well against like a lot of chaff stuff, and like what are like slowly chip away at like bigger health target, like bigger, more tanker targets like Praetorians, and your turret can take down like stuff at range. Like my terrors to stay out of the shredder swarm's range of aggression and all that stuff. So combined with a turret, you can hold down area pretty well, and it's just a very effective like fire and forget weapon, or a throw and forget grenade, basically. Now, of course, there are some problems with it, but they're not really that major problems. You know, like tougher enemies like Praetorian suppressors and Dreadnoughts will definitely, and bulks as well, will not care about this at all, pretty much. Like, especially like oppressors, bulks, and dreads. Praetorians will get affected by this decently well, but they'll take some time. But anything tougher than that, then the shredders will basically just be wailing on them for 40 seconds, since as far as I know, you can't actually destroy the shredders. The shredders are invincible, so they'll only go away when the 40-second duration ends, so you're able to keep them alive for quite a while, and they'll do quite a lot of damage. But you know, for tougher enemies like bulk, it's not really matter, because like even all 5 of them doing 8 damage each, sure it'll do some damage, but it won't do much. And if you throw a shredder grenade at, while a current shredder swarm is already out, it'll basically cause the original swarm to go away, and then the new swarm, it'll basically reset the cooldown, but it'll dissipate the old shredders and spawn new ones if you throw another grenade while a shredder swarm is already out. So you can't like double up. Like you have to wait 40 seconds to make sure that you don't accidentally cut a duration of a shredder swarm short. So is something you need to definitely keep in mind. But besides that, this thing doesn't really have much weaknesses besides that. Like besides like like very tough targets not really caring about this and just wasting the drone's time. And like maybe some aggression issues where they won't go after the exact target you want, because they'll just go after what's near them. So you can't really make them focus besides like throwing the grenade near target, and then they'll probably focus on the closest thing near where they spawn out a grenade. But after that, they'll start to separate and go after their own targets. But besides that, though, besides like, again like weird aggression issues where you can't make them focus on a single thing, and like very tough stuff not carrying, and like the duration issues where it's like you'll cause the original swarm to disappear after throwing a grenade while a swarm is already out. Besides that, this thing doesn't really have much issues. It's a very simple grenade. It definitely isn't as flashy as the mine or the plasma burster, and won't cause as much outright destruction. Like, but this thing's very reliable, like the L.U.R.E. Like you don't require terrain. Just as long as the bugs and as long as shredders can hit them, this will do quite well. So a very like overall like this thing like a very it's very consistent. Like you won't have to worry about like it won't go that high in terms of like outputting insane amount of damage, like a very good plasma burst and all that stuff. But it won't have a very like a very like far low of it doing nothing, like a mine that was like set up and did absolutely nothing, and you couldn't retrieve it for whatever reason due to terrain issues, or you got like ran off by bugs or whatever. So like this thing will always be useful, but well, it won't be massacring stuff. It'll do pretty well, but it won't do horribly, or it won't do like amazingly well. Like it won't shred stuff, but it won't immediately like be useless, basically. So very consistent grenade, very wonderful grenade. I like it a lot because again, throw in a mosh pit, you don't have to worry about friendly fire. The shredders only go after enemies, so very good for that. And it's a very effective like support tool just to have around you, just to deal some damage to grunts and shred them a little bit, and have it as a nice support tool alongside your turret to have some covering fire. So very good. And it helps your teammates out a lot when like a shredder pack deals with a grunt or a Praetorian in front of them. So a very effective support tool, and honestly probably one of my favorite engineer grenades, just for the sheer concept of spawning stuff to fight for you. It's just a very interesting concept for DRG, and just really enjoyable. So a very fun grenade. I definitely would say, besides like a few small like issues here and there, it's a very consistent grenade and will always pretty much work for whatever situation you're in. that was all 4 different grenade choices engineer can have, and honestly, I do like all of them personally. Like, I do not think there's any one grenade in particular that can be considered bad, per se. Like, definitely my favorites in like order are S.S.G, Shredder Swarm Grenade, which I just figured out right now. Like, I didn't realize it was Shredder Swarm Grenade. Like, I didn't know the S.S.G was an actual acronym, like, for some reason. So, I found that out, like, now, so that's something new, I guess. But yeah, I like the Shredder Grenade. First, I definitely like the L.U.R.E. Second, just because both of these are very, like, as, like, concept, are very flexible, but in terms of, like, gameplay and how much I like them overall, like, I would say that in terms of like flexibility, S.S.G is top, then the mine is second, because I really like hunkering down for like defensive missions. I do like the mines quite a bit. Then next is the L.U.R.E for my third most favorite, and a fourth is the plasma burster, just because it's a little bit janky, but I definitely still like it quite a bit. Like, I'm still getting used to it, so I would say most definitely like all these grenades are good, but I would say that as a concept, S.S.G and the L.U.R.E are my most, I like those the most, but in terms of like gameplay, it's, S.S.G, mine, L.U.R.E, Plasma Burster. So that's the video. So hope you all enjoyed the video. We went over like quite a bit of information. I'm trying to like lower the video length a little bit down, just edit it down a little bit. So you may notice all more editing stuff with this video, and yeah, so I'm just trying to cut down on some of the excess length a little bit, just because I ramble a little bit. So yeah, so I'm trying to improve the video, like the overall like shortness of it, to make it a lot more condensed. But either way, hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll be trying to get the video upload schedule working again. This past few days again have been a mess, so haven't really got time to upload stuff. But I'm trying to work on the archive channel again, and I'm not sure I want to. I'm not really sure if I'm going to stream. Currently, I'm trying to focus more on YouTube stuff, so I'll see about that maybe. But either way, hope you enjoyed the video, everyone. Again, like, comment, subscribe if you liked the video, and if you choose to do so. And I do appreciate any support you may throw my way. Every little bit counts. And again, hope you enjoyed the video, everyone. Appreciate you stopping by, and see you whenever I do a stream, possibly, or do another video. So again, hope you guys everyone. Appreciate you stopping by. Good night, everyone. Ciao.